Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Winging It F1 podcast, Belgian Grand Prix review. I'm Adam Dickinson, and I'm back from my 2-week holiday in Devon, and I'm here with Freddie and Nigel. Freddie, how are you?
I'm very good, thank you. I'm back from my 2-day holiday in Devon, which no one noticed about because we structured the podcast around it, in which I think I went on the other side of the road to you, Adam, and yet didn't see you. But enough of that. That's for the other podcast.
Did you structure the holiday around the podcast or the podcast around the holiday? That's the big question. Probably.
That's what I mean by other podcasts.
And Nigel, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I haven't been on holiday because I always plan my time around these podcasts, as you know. So I'm very dedicated to the Winging It F1 podcast.
Yeah, and since we're talking about that, you can find us on Twitter at Winging It F1 and all our personal Twitters. Mine's at Adam Dickinson01, Freddie's is at FredCoach1999, and Nigel's is at Nigel C. Journo, unless they've changed it since I was last on the podcast, which I hope they haven't. No one's piped up and said anything, so I'm going to hope that's correct. And we'll move on to the Belgian Grand Prix.
What a great race.
Yeah, it wasn't the best, to be honest. Max said he wasn't enjoying it and he was driving in it, which compared to some of his other radio messages at the end of Grand Prix, particularly the two at Silverstone, was a bit of a different tone. What did you guys make of it?
I think it had elements to it that were kind of intriguing, but I think there were definite saving graces. I think the fact that it wasn't wholly boring, wasn't a tedious drivel race like Barcelona, I think was, and Hungary, was because of Spa. The track allowed some alternative action to take place, such as Pierre Gasly coming through the field. Basically, that was it. And it also, I kept some battles open in various places, such as Ocon and Norris closing on Albon and so on. So there was potential for fights because it's Spa, but it shouldn't. Yeah, it was too little.
Yeah, it felt very much like the first Silverstone race without the tyre blowouts at the end to me. So just had the midfield running along, and yeah, Gasly came through, but even that didn't really excite me. I'll be honest. I don't know. Maybe it's just because he flew past on with DRS and stuff. But
I think I preferred it to Silverstone because with Silverstone it seemed to be lots happening at one bit and then nothing, and then lots happening at the end. Whereas I think I preferred this because it was sort of drip fed. It was like little bit until the end, and it doesn't have the same sort of oh my god that Silverstone had at the end, where you sort of you standing at the edge of the sofa, hopping up and down, that kind of thing. You didn't get that, but you had like little bits like,
I wasn't doing that.
I was at Silverstone. I thought, wow, this has blown it on its head. But this didn't have that. It had that kind of gentle gentle race happening gradually throughout the whole thing, which it's okay. But it's obviously, it's not a Super Bowl every week, is it? This is a lower league game. Hoping you'll get someone good in the pro draft next year.
Cross-sport references there.
Did I get it right? Did I get the pro draft right?
Yeah, but then
yes.
American football doesn't have lower leagues, so it's kind of, you got it half right. But
the one below college, high school.
So yeah, I it's interesting you said Silverstone. I thought of the Austria races, particularly the first one, where it's kind of like there weren't much doing, but those were rescued by good bits at the end. It was kind of, and actually, to be fair, the first Austria one had a Lewis versus Bottas fight, which was decent. But yeah, I think I much preferred Silverstone 1, definitely, and probably 2 as well, because they both had kind of uncertainty about it. Like Silverstone 1, you would genuinely didn't know if Lewis was going to make it until pretty much the last chicane. It was like, it seemed really in the balance. And Silverstone 2, there was stuff about, the strategy, what they'd be going on. Not as good. In Austria, obviously, there was the kind of mad fight at the end in Austria 2. There was Norris's, charge up. Was it Norris? No,
I think,
yeah.
I think,
Norris, Perez in Austria 2 as well.
Yeah.
Well, there's just the whole thing with like Perez, Ricardo, Ocon, Stroll at the end of Norris at the end of Austria 2. But I didn't really feel like this had much drama in it. It had like interesting points, but not drama.
I think I can agree with that, Adam. I think as well, this was round 7, wasn't it? And Bottas, Hamilton, and Verstappen are going to be on the podium in pretty much every race this year. And I think people, might just get tired of that because it's just, it doesn't help Red Bull don't have a good second driver, and Ferrari are not there and stuff. So, yeah, I better not say too much more.
Well, I think Renault are proving an intriguing prospect. We've got Monza coming up, which Renault performed well at last year, which sort of gave a kind of like a hint at the performance in this race now. And so, but they seem to be much better at that because they've been there in Spa. So I think in Monza, Renault are going to be a very interesting team there. And I think we've got the announcement of the Bahrain outer layout, which is just a straight followed by a straight with a fiddly bit. So that's going to be another thing to potentially pin down on Renault to see, well, what's going to happen here then? They could potentially, they started on the second row at Spa. What can they do in Monza and Bahrain?
Yeah, I think Leclerc as well kind of into that mix because he's been
not today.
Well, no, not today, but in general over the season, kind of he's been best of the rest quite a few times, and crucially in the races where he's been able to get podiums, he's been when Hamilton, Bottas, Verstappen haven't been locking out the top 3, he's been the one taking advantage of that the most. But kind of on the flip side, going to some power heavy tracks, although he did well at Silverstone, Austria and Barcelona, which were all kind of more powery tracks on paper.
Yeah, they've got a bit more medium speed to them, whereas the high speed and just everything about it just shot Ferrari in the foot. And even if it is a draggy car that's a horrific setup in high speed corners, you'd still it seemed to sort of be like Leclerc had been dragged down to Vettel's Silverstone performance rather than the other way around, which you want Vettel to come up to Leclerc's Silverstone performance, which was Leclerc finishing on the podium and getting 4th or whatever it was in the next race, with Vettel on the fringes of the points. But on this, it seemed to be Leclerc and Vettel were on a par with each other, just at the back. And I think it doesn't look. It looks like they've taken step backs throughout the year, and Leclerc's been there when he has been able to, but it's looking more and more unlikely that there will be opportunities for Leclerc or Vettel even to potentially get there and pick up where other people make mistakes. I think there's going to be few opportunities for that, and it's good that he's done it when he has. Yeah,
it's just incredible what's happened to Ferrari, really. Finishing behind an Alfa Romeo, same engine. I do think this weekend was an outlier for Ferrari. We knew there was going to be bad, but for them to be this bad, they must have got the setup wrong and stuff over practice, because this was just shocking. They barely, if they didn't have Leclerc and Vettel in the car, they would have gone out. They would have gone out in Q1. I'm pretty sure the drivers almost saved them in qualifying, and then in the race, everything. They had slow stops. Leclerc had no pace. Vettel had no pace. They had no tyre management. They were poor in the corners. They were slowest on the straights. They had no grip. Everything just went wrong. The only thing that didn't happen was that they didn't hit each other. They nearly did at one point. But it's just absolutely shocking. It really is. A multi-million-pound company at one of the best tracks in the world is getting beat by an Alfa Romeo with the same engine, the same. It's just
an Alfa Romeo that qualified last in, I think, Catalonia, but definitely at a few races this year.
Yeah, and Alfa Romeo, that no offense to Kimi Raikkonen, but he's not exactly one of the best drivers on the grid anymore. So it's just, I don't even know what more there is to say. Ferrari have got no speed, and I have no idea how Leclerc got those 2 podiums he's had this season after the performance they've had today. Well, not just today, over the weekend. So,
well, there's been some interesting comments that came out in the Ferrari press releases and everything yesterday. It seemed to be that every interview that Vettel gave, he was just like, "Yeah, we're just really slow. We haven't done a setup that's aimed for the race or anything. We are just slow." But Laurent Mekies said in the press release that they had gone for a setup that sort of aimed towards potentially rain in the race, and they're trying to paper over the cracks in their
the
setup.
middle sector is atrocious as well. So
they're not even clawing it back. Their setup is gone out of the window, and they haven't got any straight line speed because they cheated last year and presumably the year before. And
cheated. They might not have. But they might not have.
Yeah, they might not have cheated. So they would win now. No, they've cheated. And come at me, lawyers. And
FIA.
and so you've just got whatever Vettel said yesterday. It's just like, I think this is our performance, and it is. It's their performance. It was. They even with Sainz not starting the race, they finished where they started.
Yeah, Carlos Sainz in the middle of the race. Sorry, Adam. Leclerc got overtaken. Sainz went like that or something. It was obviously Sainz.
Yeah.
Ferrari next year.
They mentioned that on the BBC coverage. Yeah. It's not
poor guy, but whatever.
Yeah, you wouldn't. I think the Norris Ricciardo battle is going to be mega next year, but for Sainz, you'd just be. And it's not like there's any hope that it's really going to turn around at the moment, because there didn't seem much they can do for next year, kind of within the regulations as much as anything else, even before whether it's actually technically possible to, get back to where, anywhere near where they were last season. It's just shocking, and you don't know where they're going to go. And if they didn't, as you said, if they didn't have Vettel and Leclerc, I mean, especially Leclerc, I think this season might have even been more impressive than his season last year. Just, it's more under the radar because he's not winning races. But if they didn't have that driver partnership, they'd be
out in Q1 every race.
Yeah, it wouldn't be good, that's for sure. I think it's a shame that we've got 3 dominant drivers in the field rather than 2. Because if we only had 2 drivers dominating, then we'd have like a new face on the podium every week.
Wow, they're revolving 3rd position, but we don't. Yeah, it's 4th.
That'd be brilliant. I'd love that. That'd be so good. But yeah,
I mean, it would still be just like whichever. It's the whole it lends itself to the Class B argument, which is if you take away the top 3 teams, there's still the driver in 4th would then technically dominate.
Who's the 3rd team?
Is the 3rd team? Is it Renault Racing Point? Is it McLaren? Technically, Ferrari is 1, 2 or 3 points behind Racing Point. So, who knows? It's just that's interesting, but it's just not the top. You're right, Adam.
Thank you.
It's okay. But even if you've got junior Ferrari engine strategist at the factory sits there, goes, "Oh, what if we do this?" And they go, "Yes." Then it's a bit like, "Oh no, it's 3 token systems. We've got 2 tokens, which is the new regulations to save costs and to save on massive regulation change on the money saving for the massive regulation change coming in 2022. To save money on that, the token systems have been reintroduced for this year. You've got 2 tokens you're allowed to use essentially, and big engine sort of alterations is going to be 2 tokens. So even if they find a cure, then they're not going to be able to implement it. It's just they're not. Yeah. Shouldn't run lots of fuel, should you?
Well, while we're on the subject of top 3 teams, perhaps. What's going on with Racing Point? Because we've, debated whether because we've debated kind of whether, where they are in relation to Red Bull, but they just don't, a track which coming into the weekend, you kind of they've done strongly in all of their guises at Spa historically, and you kind of would have expected them to be somewhere near there again. They've, not had they've got the Mercedes engine modes, had them this week, and they've just then, they're not where they should be, where they want to be. What do you think?
Me and Freddie thought Perez would get third place this weekend. I think in our predictions last week. I think we both said Perez.
There we are.
Definitely one of us, but yeah, they were nowhere, weren't they? They got the strategy wrong with Perez today, I guess, by not pitting under the safety car.
But he still finished a second off Stroll, so arguably that's where he would have finished in the end. I
don't think he would have finished behind Stroll.
Well, okay, he would have finished 9th. That would be it. It's still the same points to the team. I think it would have shaked out pretty similarly, because at the start of the race, even if they had pitted Perez under the safety car, Perez was still 3 or 4 positions behind Stroll, because Perez just got a pretty naff start. So even if he had pulled it back and, filtered through,
I think they had a better race car than McLaren.
Then how did Norris jump both of them and finish 7th?
I don't know. Yeah,
no, they just had a crap.
You're right. I'm wrong.
They're just. It's a historic track that works fantastically well for them. Spa is a symbolic track for Racing Point, Force India, Jordan, all of them. But for some reason, I think be it just Renault getting there on the setup a little bit better with the trim, and McLaren sort of being on a par and just sort of occupying it slightly better, whether Sainz not being there allowed them to focus entirely a whole team behind Norris. But that's negligible difference, frankly. But they were able to just about switch with get the jump, and that enabled Norris Norris to keep on the back of Ocon. Really, I think Stroll ate into his tyres quite a lot, and I think it's just one thing led to another, and they're 9th and 10th. That's it. Yeah. And I think it's just everyone else seems to just do sort of a fraction of a different route to them and just do a fraction better, which is all I can really think of.
On that, like for so long, Racing Point Force India have been the kind of team that would get the most kind of value for money, most value out of, the position they were in the race, whatever. They kind of, seem to be the team of the midfield that you back to, take advantage of stuff like that and get an edge over that if they didn't have one in the car. And this season, they've kind of been the opposite. They've probably been underperforming in terms of results compared to where the car is, because, McLaren, Austrian Grand Prix aside, they've not been kind of stellar. They've had a few 5th places, but they've not.
Spain were clearly 3rd best.
Yeah, exactly. You're right. 4th and 5th. Spain.
Yeah.
And in Silverstone too, without Hulkenberg's calling in some issues at the end, they would have been 4th and 5th again in that one. So they should really have done better. You're right. And it just seems they've just been slightly. I don't know whether they've been bolstered by their own hype, if that makes sense. Like they're sort of like, well, we've done this in the past 2 races, and Silverstone and Barcelona aren't, they're similar tracks in some respects, but they aren't, they aren't buddies in that regard. But like, if you look at that and you think, well, okay, we've done this at these 2 tracks. If we do a similar mood set up here, maybe that will help again. But just everyone else went a bit braver with their alterations, I think.
I think there's a few things, and I think this is the first time we've seen really cool track temperatures compared to what we've seen this season. So perhaps Racing Point struggled with that. I think also, as Renault has shown, going with a low downforce package and having good straight line speed seemed to work over going with a high downforce package, which is what Ferrari say they went with, although they were still slow. But I think those two things maybe combined to as to why Racing Point were off the pace, perhaps.
I think the cool temperatures is a very good point, actually, because if you think back to Austria 2 qualifying in the wet, they were way off. Perez out in Q1. If you think back to the sort of the start of Hungary, they sort of were tentative at the start, and Perez dropped back quite a bit, and Stroll just had to use all his natural cold tyre talent to be able to do that. It seems that I think you've pretty much probably nailed it there with the cold temperature.
Yeah, Sherlock Nigel. And one of the teams you mentioned there, Renault, we've touched on them a bit already. Where do you think they fit in kind of to the picture? Because they kind of seem to be the form team, maybe, I don't know. And they've had, but I don't know. I don't know whether it's Ricciardo is kind of outdriving the car, because he is, compared to some of the other drivers in the midfield battle, he's kind of in the same way as Leclerc. He's a proven talent, a proven race winner. So I don't know whether it's him outdriving the car. I mean, Ocon had a great result today, but Nigel, where would you what do you think is going on with Renault?
Well, whatever is going on, it's working, definitely. Which we've seen last season at Canada and Monza. They had really good pace with the low downforce package, and that seems to be the case again this year, except this year they seem to have improved in the corners and the twistier sections. So then, they really seem to have pretty good form. And as Freddie mentioned before, I think we can expect them to even be pushing Red Bull at Monza. But we can talk about that in the next podcast. But it'll be interesting to see if they can continue this at other tracks with the consistency and to be consistent. But I think Fernando Alonso would be quite happy. He's re-signed for 2021.
If you were to have said at any point that Ricciardo would finish in fourth in the Renault, 3.4 seconds behind Verstappen at the end of the race, fastest lap. You're right. He said at the end on his radio that he sent it, and he did. He just absolutely went on that final lap, and we can all sit and say on paper Ricciardo's in fourth, Ocon's in fifth, but he's 25 odd seconds up the road on his teammate. Something maybe a bit less, bit fewer. But that's really good.
Yeah, I'm surprised, but I'm not like shocked, because at Silverstone, I think the first race they showed pretty good pace, and they had really good tyre wear as well. In fact, I think Renault has possibly got the best tyre wear out of all the teams, maybe. Well, I think them and McLaren perhaps have the best tyre wear, I reckon. But it was fantastic to see, and they've committed to F1, so if they can keep this upward trend, then it will be a good thing. But
it's great to see.
It's
really nice to see Ricciardo and Ocon just in a team that's sort of doing well. And Renault, when it's like a negative storyline, can just be the most depressing team in the paddock. But when it's going well, I mean, it's actually quite nice. I sort of forgot how much I kind of used to like this team, really. I've got a bit annoyed at them recently, just because they seem to be a bit doldrums. But they're not. They're doing good. Hooray. Carry on.
Yeah. I think, one more thing I'll say is that I think, didn't Ricciardo lose out in the pit stops or something? If he was behind Verstappen on the I don't think he was behind Verstappen on the safety car restart. If he was, he could have perhaps got into third. He could have perhaps got into third if he overtook him on the restart.
Yeah, no, Gasly was the one who nearly went into third.
That's right, yeah. Perez and Gasly split Verstappen and Ricciardo, wasn't it?
Ricciardo did very well on lap one to hold it on the inside of Lecom all the way through Malmedy, Rivage, and nearly have a sniff into No Name as well. Yeah. Like he did very well to hold on there. And I mean, they were saying after the race, it must be really nice for Ricciardo to be able to be up there fighting a Red Bull. But it's a bit like, well, no, he lost out. It must be actually really awful.
Yeah. But it could have been even better today had Mercedes or Verstappen slipped up, or had Ricciardo had that chance at the restart if he didn't have the cars in between him and Max, because the Renault top speed was amazing this weekend.
If it got in front, there was no way it would have been passed under DRS by Verstappen with the draggy setup that Red Bull famously run, and there's no.
And he managed his tyres well as well.
So he can control it in the middle sector. Could Ricciardo, if he had got in front, could have controlled it really nicely, kept Verstappen at kind of arm's length, and then just shot away. And we saw how hard it was for Albon to keep up with drivers ahead of him. Don't don't jump onto your Albon hating time. That's later. It's hard to keep up with the Honda engine on the straights, even if you're fast in the middle sector. So with the low trim Renault, he could have just shot away and held Verstappen at arm's length if he got in front, but he didn't. So that didn't happen. But that's what could happen in Monza. Hooray! Carry on.
Yeah, I'll take it up quickly. The other, we'll skip a few places for now, but we'll go back. Don't worry. But, Gasly had. I mean, we mentioned him in the introduction as kind of the standout storyline, probably, of the race. He finished 8th, which is another good result for AlphaTauri. And was he last at one stage?
Yeah. Yeah, I think he was.
Yeah. So
I'm trying to remember when Leclerc.
Performance from him, but yeah, I think he's putting a lot of. I don't know. It's difficult it's difficult to not get drawn into the Red Bull debate, but kind of he's doing all he needs to at the moment. Kind of where does that rank for you in performances of the season, Freddie?
Up there, way up there. I mean, he was on the hards at the beginning, but he, flew up from where he was 12th on the grid to in way in the top 10, and then he got past Sergio Perez up over Rouge Radion, which was fantastic. It was, oh man, it was ballsy and terrifying, and Perez squeezed him like there was no tomorrow. Perez has gone off worse there in the past with Ocon when they were teammates when one of them hit the wall. I can't remember, I think it was Ocon, then got squeezed into the wall by Perez. So he's that's a contentious place to be. If I were Gasly, I would be not coming out of that with a clear head. But he kept in there. He had a little jab back at Perez, just like, hey, don't put me in the wall, mate. Come on. And then just like drove clean past him. And then, yeah, just carried on with his charge. And then the safety car came in at pretty much the wrong time for him, but it allowed him to give us some heroics. And yeah, I mean, he was faster than everyone else, but he wiped the floor really with everyone he came past. And I think what really sealed it was the fact that despite Perez pitting earlier than him, he came back through and did take Perez still at the end, and Stroll for equal measure. So he did a cracking job, I think. And on a weekend where he's come back to Spa, where the site of Anton Hubert's passing last year, and the horrendous accident. We know how much that has affected Pierre. He lived with Antoine for a bit, so kudos to him. That's just, yeah. I think it is up there, Adam. To answer your question, it's one of the drives of the season so far.
I don't think it's one of the drives of the season so far, but it was a very good. It's probably the standout performance of the day, as we said. I think I'm just thinking without the safety car, I think perhaps he could have even gotten to 6, 7, maybe a couple of positions higher, because he was on that hard tyre to start with. So, yeah, but it was a great performance yet again from Gasly. He's really impressive, and yeah, I think people are maybe underestimating that this AlphaTauri is right up there in amongst the midfield runners, because before the season I thought AlphaTauri would be back with Haas and Alpha at the back, Alfa Romeo, not AlphaTauri. But yeah, it was a great performance at the weekend from Gasly.
Yeah, I mean, we'll talk more in another podcast about the Gasly, Albon, Red Bull situation. I'm sure we've all got plenty to say about that. But Albon did finish 6th. He didn't get the best strategy. It's like the 3rd race in a row, I think, that he not had the optimal strategy. And I don't really understand where Red Bull are coming from with that kind of where. And he held off Ocon, for a few laps, to be fair, on very worn tyres before coming on the final lap. But kind of, is it again kind of difficult to rate that performance from Albon because of the factors against it, or kind of, what are your thoughts on that? Freddie?
It's a bit of a standoff here, so who goes first? I think it is hard to rate. at the end of the day, you could argue he didn't make the advantage of the mediums when he could have done, when he needed to, which left him sitting pretty to be taken later on when they went, be it being stuck behind Perez and Gasly, where Ricciardo managed to get past. But I don't really know. I don't know how much they dropped off, because it did seem to be, he did have a gap to Ocon, and Ocon was close. It seemed to be sort of only just about able to match it until the end, where it was just him and Norris just both able to close. So it seemed to be it felt to me like he was hitting a bit of a cliff, but yeah, I don't know. He didn't make the most of it when he could have done, to be fair.
Do you think, Freddie, if he was on the hard tyre, he would have beaten Ricciardo today?
No, I don't think it would have been Ricciardo, but I think he would have beaten Ocon.
Okay.
Yeah. And Norris.
I mean, if you're saying that, to not beat a Renault when you're in a Red Bull, I know the Renault, was really good this year, but I think for me, this is how I see it. On a normal day, Albon should be P4. On a bad day, he should be P6. Now, I don't know how many times that's happened this season, but it's just not there for me. I mean, he was half a second away in qualifying, I think. He was looking good up until Q3, but again, there's nothing. There's no signs of him improving for me, and I think that's the worrying thing. That's my problem.
I think it would have been very difficult to beat Ricciardo, though. I mean, we all said how well he did, and that he could well have been on for third had things gone a different way in the pit stop. So I think that probably says more about how good a drive it was from Ricciardo, who's a driver who's been in the sport for a while and been in a top team for a while. But yeah, it was. I don't understand what Red Bull are doing with the strategies for Albon. I don't know whether it's trying to kind of do research for. I mean,
it's not the time, is it?
No,
they were seriously considering the two-stop with both drivers at one point. They were very, very. I think with Albon, I think they were certain that they would be going onto a two-stop, perhaps. But then they're like, oh, he's able to manage it just. But I think they were very careful to do the one-stop. But I think they were genuinely probably close to 70-30 convinced they were going to do a two-stop, and then could then, if they do a medium stint when everyone else is on hards with Albon, then he can get track position later on. But obviously that wasn't the case. And at that stage in the race when they were pitting, the tyre deg knowledge was just not there, because it was a bit too early. Because Perez made the softs last quite long, but that's Perez, and it was only a pretty similar difference then for a couple of laps before Gasly pitted on the hards. So the tyres seem to be a bit weird there, and Spa's such a long lap that it doesn't really help either with tyre information. Like you can't really easily predict, like, oh, well, if it's a 60 lap race, 20, 30, 40, it's easier to sort of get your head round, whereas a 44 lap race is slightly harder anyway. But, that shouldn't cut it for F1 strategists. But yeah. So
I don't think it's fair to, pin it on Red Bull's strategy, because ultimately, even if you get a bad strategy, you still have to make the most of it. And again, you can't judge Albon on what, even if he has an amazing race, he say he gets on the podium or something through luck. You can't really judge his season on one race. You have to look at him through the season. And this season, he hasn't really shown anything. Like I think today it was the best race of the year for him so far, out of the 7 races, which says a lot, because even with this, which was his best race, I think he still wasn't like great, I guess.
I mean, I'm determined to not get sucked into a debate on his wider season, but I can't. Over the last, I just don't get it with Red Bull with the strategy. Like, I don't.
They're trying to do something different because they know he doesn't have the pace, so they're trying to do they know he doesn't have the pace.
30 laps to go.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that if it is because they don't
on C2, C3, C4.
Yeah, I mean,
it's a step below the tyres.
If they are saying that it's because they don't think he has the pace, then that would be a worry to me looking at it. But it feels like given the kind of position that they were in, that he's qualified high up, and you know he's not been in this position of kind of being in the top 6 that many times and kind of being on the same strategy as everyone else. So it just would have seemed a lot more valuable to see how he goes on a standard strategy and get something from that than put him on a different strategy for, I don't know whether they were trying to beat Ricciardo and get 4th, but yeah, it just seems really...
But even if he was on the hard, even if he was on the hard tyre today and he finished behind Ricciardo, got 5th, would you have been impressed with that?
Well, I don't know. We don't know. That kind of the problem is, it's all if he did this. If he finished behind Ricciardo, would it be good? If he finished ahead of Ricciardo, would it be good? Like, because we don't know, because we didn't see it, because they pitted him onto medium.
No, I know, but I'm just saying, if he
in that race, Ricciardo won. So
exactly. So it's like, I'd just rather see, and then we can like judge it. Whereas, it depends.
That lends itself to Nigel's argument, really, because that just means that they're having to think outside the box, because they can't go plan A because he's qualifying down the order.
Yeah, I mean, they can't do plan A anyway, because to get into Q3, he can't even qualify on the mediums. He has to do it on the softs, whereas Max and Nat can do it. So he's compromising himself there because he doesn't have the ultimate pace. So he's just on the same strategy as the cars around him. He can't do something different, even though he's got the car to do it.
Okay, so that's the top 10 covered, but one of the biggest, if not the biggest incident in the race was 2 drivers all the way outside the top 10, and that was Antonio Giovinazzi and George Russell. So Giovinazzi went off, hit the barrier, and then kind of slid back onto track, and his wheel came loose and then hit George Russell's front right, which broke the suspension on Russell's car and sent him into the barrier. It was a nasty accident, and probably one that made you, again at Spa, made you thankful that the halo is in operation on the cars, because it could have been a lot worse had that not been the case and the tyre had struck Russell or Russell's car at a different angle. But kind of, is this something to be worried about, wheels leaving the tethers and leaving the cars, do you think?
I think that's not really much more you can do. They've done a lot over the last few decades to make sure the wheel does stay on, but you can't always guarantee it. And I think it was just one of those unfortunate cases where, with the G-forces and the angle, Giovinazzi's car hit the barrier, the tyre just fell off. But like you said, that's what the halo is there for. Luckily, it hit Russell's tyre instead, which caused it to puncture instantly, which I found crazy. But yeah, if it was going for Russell's head, the halo would have been there to prevent it, which is great. So yeah, good to see that the safety of the cars is good. And I'm not really sure there's much they can do with the wheel temps though.
Yeah, we've seen a few more incidents than is I'm comfortable with, really, with wheels coming off this year. But it's not. I agree with Nigel. There's not really anything else I can think of for them to do. I mean, presumably there's going to be a double check on all of the tethers now, but that's normal, and the tethers have worked fantastically. There's no reason why the energy going into the crash should be so much more than usual, if you will, to sort of sever the tethers, which is what to me it looked like from the sort of brief shot you get of the wheel with the sort of essentially the spikes of the suspension out of it. It looks like it's been severed through, all the tethers just not connected properly. So I think that's all that seems to have happened, and that just unfortunately came into George Russell's wheel. I think it's great that it did go into his wheel, because if George Russell had sort of veered slightly differently, it had gone straight up his nose of the car, that would have been catapulted into the sky. And yeah, it would have ridden on the halo, but it would have gone really much worse if that had happened, I think. So there is probably grounds for a few more checks, a triple check before the race perhaps, but that's all I can really suggest. I think, both drivers got out immediately, but the crash, just the debris strewn across the track was horrific when they cut to it. They were filming Hamilton and Bottas on the world feed, and then, yellow flag, sector 3, what's that? Has, I don't know, Kvyat gone wide, which it normally is. It's normally something like that. Nothing. It's a non-entity.
Why Kvyat?
Yeah, yeah. I thought
Because he's a
that.
non-entity. I don't know. It was mid grid. Someone had done something, and Kvyat was mid grid. I don't know. But it was. Then they cut to the horrendous scene of gravel and stuff and debris and bits of car on one side of the track, on the middle of the track, 2 cars sort of steaming on the other side of the track. No sort of discernible objects apart from the safety cell and monocoque of the car. The wings have been, because you could see sort of Giovinazzi sort of just destroyed car. And it's like, oh no, this looks horrendous. This should be stopped, cut away. Don't look at this. And it was uncomfortable viewing until they both got out, really, I think.
So is it, do you think, just kind of, I guess like in any sport, that you can only do so much? You know, you're going to get freak accidents in everything, and the Hubert one springs to mind because that's, you know, such a tragic event, but they didn't actually change anything on the cars or the tracks that I'm aware of, and they just kind of concluded that it was a freak accident and nothing could be done to prevent it. Do we think this is, you know, the same thing, that the tyre tethers are incredibly strong? I think that something like they can, in terms of tensile strength, they can pick up something like 13 F1 cars and hold weight, which is incredible. Wow. Is it just something like that you can do, you know, putting the halos in and the tyre tethers on and just hope that that's enough?
I think with the Hubert, just to be clear, I think they did add 2 extra barriers this year compared to normal. Right. Is that right, Freddie?
Yeah, they've extended the tyre barrier at the top of Radion because
so they did do
sort of all the way round. Yeah, and I think they've made it a bit deeper as well. But I'm not sure about that. They've taken off the AstroTurf that was there, I think, because that's when Kevin Magnussen, he had a big crash there in 2016 when he was in the Renault. And that his car, he got onto the AstroTurf and the car just sort of flicked around and flew into the wall at uncontrollable speeds, obviously, at the top of that corner. And so they've taken off the AstroTurf as a result of, basically, to prevent, as if your car does sort of have a swapper there, they don't lose grip completely. They can sort of regain it. And you saw in the F2 race this morning that Luca Giotto in a high-tech car, he was running sort of 5th or 6th of mid-pack, and he got a bit of a swapper on a restart at the top of the hill and was able to sort of just gather it up straight away and lost 1 position because there was it was just on the tarmac, completely the tarmac runoff, proving why we have tarmac runoff right there in that race. So I think you're right, Adam. They're sort of, I don't know what else we can do.
Yeah. Same.
Yeah. I think that in every sport, obviously cricket, Philip Hughes died, it must be like 5 or 6 years ago now, but that, you know, that was kind of similar, just 1 in a million chance. And we've had footballers collapsing from cardiac arrest, same in cycling, same in rugby. I think, you know, there's concussion problems with a lot of sports as well. But yeah, looks like one of those freak accidents that it's quite, you know, you've just got to hope that the 1 in a million chance doesn't come off, because the safest thing for any sport or any activity to do is not go ahead. But
yeah,
you know,
you're right.
It's an acceptable risk, and I think in this case it is.
Yeah, completely. I agree with you. And yeah, I mean, the worst that happened to Russell and Giovinazzi was that they were slightly winded. Russell was back in the pits before he entered the safety car. It was a very fast Belgian marshal or something on a scooter, but they both straight back at it, and you know, on to the next one already for them. So
okay, well, we've covered that. The only other kind of major incident happened before the race started, with Carlos Sainz not making it to the grid with an exhaust problem. It's off the back of last week, and I can't get the thing. It's off the back of him getting a very good result in Barcelona 2 weeks ago now. And I mean, how frustrating must that be for him? Because he's not he's trailing Norris in kind of the standings and in performances. Probably Norris has been the more impressive driver, and then he gets a bit of momentum up and immediately it's cooked because he can't make the start.
Yeah, it's massively frustrating to not start the race, reliability issue. Well, we don't really see these kind of issues too much nowadays. I know Nico Hulkenberg didn't start the race a few weeks ago at Silverstone, but yeah, for Sainz, it's just one of them things. Really, you have to move on and hope for better. But Norris had a decent race. He lost out at the start again, which was a bit frustrating for him because it's quite a few times he's lost out at the start, but he seemed to recover quite well. I think the McLaren is a car that runs well in clean air, but in the traffic it struggles a little bit compared to, say, the Renault or the AlphaTauri. But yeah, Norris came alive at the end and got a few more good points. But yeah, I'm really not sure about McLaren this year because they started off really well, but the last couple of races they seem to drop back a little bit. So, but they keep picking up a few points, and that's what you have to do ultimately. Because if you have to look at racing point, you haven't maximised their chances. So yeah, a race of two halves for McLaren.
Yeah, he was straight away relegated to fan before the race. It was a bit of a shame for him, really. Well, I don't really know how to deal with that if you're a driver. Like you look at it, but I think particularly from a team perspective, like with so much practice, so much effort to get to that stage, and pit lane opens 30 minutes to the race. You know, you're psyched up. Everyone on the team is psyched up. Everyone's ready. You've been going over everything from since 3 o'clock the day before. You've been looking over all the data, looking over what's the best opportunity up until late at night, early in the morning. You're back doing that, figuring out the best strategy. So it's like, cool, now we're in the car. This is it. We're going to do this. Oh, the exhauster's gone. Damn. Back to the garage. End of. And you just think, oh, it's the most crushing thing that you get to such a stage. And I mean, at least it wasn't the last lap, but like for Lando last year, where he broke down from 5th place, a solid, brilliant, one of his best rides of the year last year, and he lost to 10 points straight out. And at least it wasn't that for Carlos Sainz, I think. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of irritating.
I think Sainz has been one of the unluckiest drivers this year because he's had problems with pit stops. Yeah, that, and he's also had problems in the races with pit stops and stuff as well when he's been running in a good position. Then Spa he didn't even start. So yeah, I think it's a little bit deceiving the Norris-Sainz battle as to Norris is ahead, but I don't think Sainz is as far off as some people think.
It did leave a bit of oil on the track as well. It was a bit slippery in the final chicane. Like Hamilton went off there, Bottas went off there, sort of when they're on the kind of in their rhythm, they're sort of a little bit, they're in the zone a little bit, just getting on with it.
So hard at the front.
Oh, it's gone a bit. Oh, okay. Oh, and that's it. Oh, gone wide a little bit. Oh, well. Because, a touch of oil down there, perhaps from his exhaust. They showed a clip of it before the race and it was sort of spilling out a bit, but nothing massive. It seemed to, it didn't really help Lando Norris at the end because then he locked up when he was having a last lap sniff at Alex Albon for 6th place. Then he locked up and just completely missed the corner. Bless him. So it was shame for Sainz. That's all I can really say. Shame for McLaren.
Yeah, and we've covered all the major events of the race, but we will kind of touch back on the leaders because we didn't discuss it too much. It was at the front. It was, a kind of formality. There wasn't much, challenge. There was Bottas didn't do great off the start, and there was a bit through the first sector where it looked like something interesting could happen, but in terms of the two Mercedes, they were kind of rampant. There was no sign of the problems that troubled them at Silverstone or the Red Bull Ring, and just another dominant drive for them, and particularly Lewis. Where does this leave Bottas? Has his position changed? Is it just kind of another nail in the coffin for his season?
I mean,
Lewis's best season, isn't it?
sorry?
Lewis's best season. Hands down, already.
It's only been 7 races.
He's 50 points clear of Bottas. 50 points clear of Bottas, 47 clear of Verstappen. Only been 7 races.
Yeah, but
Wow.
28. I think we should debate about this at the end of the season, because 2018 and 2017 was pretty good as well. But,
Okay, cool.
but yeah, for Bottas, yeah, I'm sure. I don't know about you, Freddie and Adam. Freddie, you could see the pictures, obviously, but Bottas looked really close to Hamilton down Eau Rouge, and I thought he would at least have a chance to get side by side down the Kemmel Straight, because Eau Rouge is flat even at the start. So
Yeah.
Bottas must have lifted or whatever for whatever reason. But yeah, I was thinking, right, he's going to get him here down the Kemmel Straight, because we know how draggy these cars are, get the slipstream and take the lead on the first lap. But it just didn't happen. And the same thing happened on the restart as well. Nowhere near, and didn't even get close. I was just like, he knows those are his chances to win the race, and for whatever reason, he didn't go for it. I don't know whether it's the team telling him, don't attack, or is it him, not being able to do it. He's baffling.
It feels to me like it is him not able to do it, because he wasn't boxed in at all by Verstappen.
No.
Verstappen was focusing on Ricciardo completely. They were both behind Bottas, but Verstappen couldn't quite get alongside Bottas. And when he was alongside, I think for a little bit he was close to being alongside, but Bottas then was able to pull ahead a bit more. And it was as if Bottas was so focused on behind that he just wasn't thinking about any hope of an attack. And then he was like, okay, good, that's dealt with. Where's some breaking point? Cool, done. And that was it for me for Bottas, and that was it for the race. It was one of the most lackluster performances from Bottas, I think, because he doesn't even have an excuse if he was jumped by Stroll and Verstappen, or he was already in the lead. He doesn't have that excuse. So he didn't go for it for some reason again, and then when he was behind, he was just gradually slipping back. Oh, there's a safety car. Yay. Oh, no. I'm going to slip back again.
Come on. He's had quite a lot of safety car restarts this season from second place and not managed to make any of them work. But over the season, who do you think is Hamilton's biggest rival? Would you say it's Verstappen for the title? Would you say it's Verstappen or Bottas?
Himself.
Himself, yeah. I was going to say, yeah.
Probably.
If Verstappen or Bottas is going to give it anything, there's only 3 points difference. I think at the moment I would package them as the threat rather than as individual potential. Verstappen could do it, potential Bottas could do it. Because I think the results they will get will be relatively similar, actually, to be honest, based on the form we've just had for this past 7 races. But I think if Hamilton is going to throw it away, both of them will be in a position to pick it up if it's thrown away to that level. But Hamilton would need to throw it away.
And okay,
if he did, I think Verstappen.
If he did, or if he gets injured or gets COVID or whatever, and misses races or whatever, you're saying Verstappen, Freddie? Nigel?
It depends on. It depends on the car. I'm really not sure, because the Red Bull tend to develop better than Mercedes, don't they? But then
it's like a Stoffel Van Dorn is, doesn't it?
But then again, yeah, the Mercedes is such a good car. I'll go with Bottas, just because Mercedes would then put all the eggs into Bottas's hands.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I think it is quite a flawed question, but that's what we like. And yeah, I'd go with Bottas.
It's kind of sad we're all having to ask that question, isn't it?
Can I give a shout out to my least favourite rule in Formula One?
No.
Okay. So I think it was for 2019, might be in 2018 season, that they said, we're going to do away with the safety car line rule, and you can only overtake at the start-finish line. It's like, okay, fair enough. But when you look at when Hamilton led away from the safety car today, they were all tripping over each other, trying not to overtake each other. Let them race there. Put a safety car line just before the bus stop and give it the first braking zone at full speed. Give them a fight. Let them race. Don't if you're going to do that, Hamilton, sit and wait until you get to the start-finish line before going, because otherwise it's infuriating. Anyway, carry on. Again, that's my catchphrase now.
And away from the racing, the other kind of big news since we last did a podcast, or since Freddie and Nigel last did their podcast, is the Bahrain announcement that there's going to be 2 races at Bahrain, and one is going to be on the outer circuit, which is basically a square with 3 sides in a straight line and then some S's in the other side. It's a bit of a weird one. It's going to be very strange. They're thinking sub-minute laps. Is it sub-minute or sub-45 second? But there's going to be very
45
short.
seconds, oh my word.
55. 55 was the simulation I saw.
45 would be pretty quick, wouldn't it?
45 would be, you wouldn't be able to keep track of it.
But yeah, it's going to be, well, what do you think? What do you guys think of it? It's different to some, tracks that we've had in F1 for a long time.
Yeah, it's good to see some variety. As I talked about for a certain website a few months ago before the season, variety is what Formula One needs. You need different styles of tracks to have different results and all that stuff. So having a circuit like this where they're going to have to put low downforce, be good down the straights, is going to be a unique challenge for the team. So yes, Mercedes might still get 1 and 2, and they probably will. But behind that is going to be a whole train of cars, and it's going to be great. Yeah, it should be pretty fun.
It's going to be great for the F2 finale.
Yeah.
That's where the final race is. It's going to be a sprint race around the Bahrain outer layout, which is just going to be a slipstream fest in the way that F2 can be on most tracks, but it's going to be ridiculous. And if you're looking at F2 as it is now, where you've got 10 points separating the top 2 in the championship, boom, 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 it'll be brilliant. So I'm really looking forward to it more for that than the F1.
It's going to be a sprint race on the sprintiest circuit that F1's had for a very long time. I think I heard someone compare it to the Avus track in Germany that they used in the 50s. It was literally 2 massive straight. Yeah, it was like two sides of the motorway, and then a hairpin at each end, pretty much. It was a bit of a strange one, but yeah, I'm very excited to see how it's different, and I think it'll be a chaotic race, or I hope it will be, or I think it'll just be chaotic. Even if the racing itself isn't that chaotic, it'll be chaotic to watch.
Bahrain's been really good in recent years.
Yeah.
With the slipstream, so just add more to it. Go on then. Oh, what's going to happen now? Presumably they'll put a DRS down the final straight as well, which they haven't done in the past, because normally they'd have one in the middle of the track. So if it's just going to be, oh, he's got him. Oh, he's got him back. Oh, he's got him back again. Oh, he's got him again. Oh, he's got him again. And it'll be closer to an IndyCar race than F1's ever got.
Yeah. F1 should be more IndyCar.
That's definitely another podcast.
There'll be no point having, you might as well just have one DRS zone starting at like the 3rd straight, kind of the straight that goes to the last corner, and then finishing. Yeah, just do that, because like it's all for 3/4 of the lap. It's all going to be flat out DRS anyway. So yeah, I think I'm excited to see how it works, and
give them a nitrous button.
Apart from Mercedes.
How dare you? How dare you suggest holding back the people who are winning, Nigel?
So that's what the FIA are trying to do, except it's not going to happen.
I mean, yeah, they might as well have
Nigel
just
Stewart Chew.
instead of bringing in
Johnny Herbert.
Instead of bringing in the engine rule, I feel like they should have just give Mercedes some lead weight or something. Like it's the same amount of targeting, but I don't know. I know you discussed that.
BCCC. That's ballast.
I know you
60 kilos in Lewis Hamilton's car, or however it is that they give to Ash Sutton these days. 60 kilos.
But it's just like, it's so kind of targeted at Mercedes. Like, it kind of, or feels like that's the aim of it. But yeah, you discussed that, and I think you kind of echoed a lot of my thoughts really on it, so we won't go into that. And we have got to the end of the Belgian Grand Prix review and a few other things besides. It was good to be back, good to be chatting about this stuff after 2 weeks away. And yeah, we will do.
I really missed doing this podcast while I was on holiday in Devon by the beach.
Yeah, I listened to the bar preview on the beach. So yeah, sitting out sunbathing. It was great. But we will be back next week or in a few days for our Italian Grand Prix preview. We'll be doing more Albon talk, and we'll also be talking about the Italian Grand Prix because that's what this podcast is. But we've talked about our Twitters earlier in the show. But Freddie, where can people find us?
Oh, here we go. We have our very own podcast Twitter account, which is at WingItF1, where you can find various tweets. Yes, we have all have got our own personal Twitter accounts, where the tweets are also various. Mine is at Fred Coates 1999. Adam's was and still is at Adam Dickinson 01, and at Nigel C. Journo is the tag of young Nigel. We can also be found as a podcast on YouTube, on Spotify, on iTunes, on Google Play about a day afterwards for some reason, and on Acast, which is our podcast provider. We've got our own website where you can find the podcast, and that is really kind of it. There's nowhere else. There's next week.
Yeah, we need to start doing that at the start of the show, really, because...
No, we just need to stop doing it, to be honest.
But then people will never know where to find us.
Yeah, even though they're watching or listening already.
No, they're not. Give us a wave if you're watching.
Yeah, well, we will, on that note, we will wrap up from me, Freddie, Nigel, and me.
You didn't wave.
I mean,
yeah, no.
the end of the podcast are always chaotic, but yeah,
thank you very much.
See you. Yeah, thanks for listening. We'll see you in a few days for our Monza preview. And until then, goodbye.